Let's say you're a tax firm. I don't know, first thing came to mind. If you're a tax firm, you might want to do, first of all, just understanding how do people understand their taxes? How do they figure out what to do? Because that'll understand the mindset they're coming into. Let's say that's an example. But first, that once you've said who's going to be the leader, now say, what is it we want to learn? Is it broad or is it really narrow, such as how do you feel after we provide you with your taxes?
Hello and welcome to the whole new episode of Engati CX. I am your host Drishti, and today you folks are in for a treat as we have a customer experience expert joining with us on the show. But before I introduce you to our guest, allow me to introduce you to the magic of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code chatbot platform, available across 14 channels with 35,000 bots created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by INC.com, TechWorld, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 300,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest, Jim Tincher is the founder of Heart of the Customer, an organization that's dedicated to help business create amazing experience with a solid ROI through customer empathy and change management practices. Before working on Heart of Customer, Jim led customer experience efforts at Best Buy and United Health Group, where he discovered the importance of change management. Since then, he dedicated his professional life to understanding the correlation between satisfied, loyal customers and sustainable business growth, and to help improve their customer experiences in a way that shows meaningful ROI. So, hi, Jim. We are really happy to have you on Engati.
Drishti, great. Thank you for having me. Been looking forward to this.
So I would like to begin with the first question that we have for you is, what is the importance of customer journey mapping and how does it help in creating great customer experiences?
Excellent, thanks. Let's start first by aligning on what journey mapping is, because it means different things to different people. One of the real challenges we have as a customer experience capability industry is that we use the same terms, but we use them to mean different things. And so let's first align what journey mapping is and customer journey mapping. And it's about the customer journey map is a visualization of the customer experience. It's also one of the less important parts of customer journey mapping. Now, that artifact is nice, and highly visual artifacts are proven to drive more empathy, more change. But it's how do we create that? And it's through very direct involvement between employees and customers to learn what are the most important moments in their journey that you can take action against. So therefore, the importance of customer journey mapping is to allow you to really zero in on what's most important for your customers and to engage your staff in driving change against that. Now, we do a lot of this, so we're real geeks about journey mapping. Specifically, I should say customer journey mapping, because it's not a customer journey map if you don't involve your customers. And it's created through conversations. We find some folks believe that if you take your staff, put them in a conference room, give them Post-it notes, we've got a journey map. No, you have a hypothesis map, you have your thoughts, but our work has found that typically when employees create the journey, they typically get the steps pretty close. They understand what the steps are, they wouldn't be in business otherwise. But what they miss are those most critical steps to the customer, what we call moments of truth, that are those defining moments that make or break the experience. Yeah. These are those steps in the process that will determine whether a customer continues with you, becomes loyal, spends more with you, or finds alternatives instead. Mm-hmm. And what we found in our research is those are the moments that employees are least likely to predict.
Okay.
So what journey mapping does then is allows your organization to align over what is most important to your customer, so you can really focus your innovation against those moments with a disproportionate impact on whether customers remain loyal to you or go somewhere else.
So how do we go about using this customer journey mapping to create great customer experiences?
Sure. Well, first thing we found, so a couple of years ago, we did a survey on journey mapping success. And I'm a real geek about journey mapping. And we asked on a 5-point scale, and I was certain everybody's going to choose a 4 or a 5. And we're just going to have to try to differentiate separates the most successful from the somewhat successful. But interestingly, that's not what we found. What we found actually is that only 1 out of 3 gave it a 4 out of 5. Most people are not successful at journey mapping, which blew me away. We see our clients who are able to really rally the troops, make incredible gains. And so I wanted to understand, what is it that separates that 1 out of 3 who are really successful from the rest? We found it fell into 3 categories. And I'm going to go actually from third to first. And the third was, first of all, selecting what journey do we want to map? Let's say, for example, you're a retailer. Well, a retailer has a lot of different journeys. They have the first-time visitor. They have we know from our work in retail that often, depending on the type of retailer, one purchase may actually involve 3, 4, or 5 trips for a high-ticket item. So there's that overall journey there. There's a returns journey. There's a just out shopping journey. It varies there. So what's that journey we're trying to understand? I spent some time with Best Buy, and the journey to buy a DVD player is very different from that of buying a high-end home entertainment system, which is again different from buying a computer. So what's that right journey is first of all. If we look instead at more of a business-to-business journey, let's say for a manufacturer, well, you have that brand new customer onboarding journey, which we find, especially in B2B, that onboarding or implementation journey tends to be the most important. You have the ongoing ordering journey. You have the trying new products or samples journey. You have the customer service journey. First step is saying, okay, this is the journey that we want to focus on. There's some research from Customer Think came out about 1.5 years ago that the most effective organizations first map that overall end-to-end journey, which is high level, doesn't necessarily lead itself directly ROI. It's identify where problems are, but then use that to come back later on and go deeper and dive into specific sub-journeys. So that first step is deciding what does we want to map. The second one, Drishti, I shouldn't even have to talk about this. It frustrates me to have to bring it up, but the most effective programs involve customers in their journey mapping. And the thing is, you can't take the kind of thinking that led to your broken customer experience, add post-it notes, and it magically gets better. Now, you have to add the voice of the customer. So that's number 2, is do that. And number 3, and this comes back to your specific question. I'm eventually getting to your question, which is how do they drive it? Number 3 is that they involve a broad cross-functional team. And we find from our clients, the organizations that are most able to drive change involve dozens of people throughout the organization, the core journey mapping team, and share the results all throughout. And so with our survey, we found is that only 30% of participants actually involve the information technologies group in their journey mapping. But every journey map has technology implications, or almost everyone. So what that means is that the rest, the 70%, once journey mapping is done, now they have to go try to get the IT team up on what's going on, and they lose a lot of time trying to do that. They lose a lot of momentum. Only 7% included human resources. Now, when I talk about that, most people say, well, duh, why would we involve HR? Well, every journey mapping, and in fact, every customer experience initiative should also be a culture initiative. And you need to have the sustainers of the culture as part of it. Now, in some groups, human resources is all about compliance and forms and benefits. Okay, if that's the case, we don't want them there, but you need to find the keepers of the culture and involve them in your journey mapping, because they're going to help embed the voice of the customer inside of your culture. And so the most effective organizations are very deliberate in deciding what is it we want to solve? What's the business problem we're going after? That selects the right journey. They're thoughtful about which customers we want to involve and how. And then lastly, they think about who needs to be part of this initiative so we can actually drive some change coming out of it.
That totally makes sense. And the second point that you have highlighted, that customer needs to be the center and the part of this journey, is where the majority of people are, just fall out, and they think that okay, this is what the customer is thinking, but not asking the customer what they are thinking.
Exactly. It's amazing. So one of the, in January, I don't know if you saw in December, Forrester came out with a prediction that 1 out of 4 customer experience people would lose their jobs this year. Now, that was before the pandemic. That was just because that a lot of people in customer experience are focused on surveys, but aren't driving business outcomes. And that blew me away because that customer think research a year earlier said that 1 out of 4 programs can drive business value. And so, Drishti, I get really interested. I said, okay, well, what separates that 1 out of 4 who are going to be fired from those 1 out of 4 who are really displaying customer experience excellence? Mm. They're able to drive the organization. They're able to show business impact. It's what we all want to be. So what separates them? And there are a lot of things, but one of those is what we discovered is that an incredible number of customer experience people never talk to customers. It blew me away. I'm like, well, how can you be in customer experience if you are not regularly out there talking to customers? And when we do our interviews, we've now interviewed 87 customer experience people so far this year. And we'll ask them, how often do you talk to customers? And these are direct quotes. We hear from people, well, we talk to customers all the time. We run a survey every week. Okay, surveys are great. Surveys are important. Surveys are not talking to customers. When you talk to customers yourself, you learn a lot that you can then put in the surveys. When you look, for example, at chatbots, you need surveys in order to understand what people are doing. You need a lot of data. But you also need the conversation with customers to understand why they're doing what they're doing, why they're asking the questions, so then you can target your implementations against those needs that they have. And in fact, we find by talking with customers, you can not only figure out what this problem is, you can also predict what their next problem is going to be. And then that way, using chatbots as an example, you could actually program it so that it not only solves this problem, but can actually head off the next problem they're going to have. And that's the kind of power you get from having personal conversations with your customers. Now, we put that as part of our journey mapping process. We find the most effective customer experience leaders are putting that into every process. One of my customer experience heroes, and I don't think anybody's ever called him this before, but is A.J. Lafley, who used to be the CEO of Procter & Gamble. And it's a multi-billion-dollar organization, huge organizations. And Lafley would talk to consumers every month. And he said, I never failed to learn something. I talk to them. And what I tell our clients, because what I often hear is I'm too busy to talk to customers. Well, if the CEO of Procter & Gamble can find time to talk to customers, then we all can.
So what tips would you give to a small business when crafting this customer journey mapping?
Well, we're a small business. Our clients are large, but we're small. And we always get asked, do you do a journey map of your customers? And, I'd laugh it off. But about a year and a half ago, we said, well, all right, it's probably time we do that. We really need to do that. And so you don't have to be a multi-billion-dollar company to do a journey map. People engage us, it's $125,000, $150,000. So we tend to work with very large organizations. But we want to do our own map. And so we were going to pay somebody else. So how do we do that? The first step is that it takes time. And it has to be somebody inside your organization who's going to spend that time. We'll often talk to 20 or 30 customers in a journey. So think internally your group, who has time to lead that, to be able to conduct 20 or 30 interviews? So first of all, find the right leader to do that. Second of all, coming back from our overall best practices is say, okay, what is it we want to learn? What's most critical? And you can use different things to come up with that. It might be good just to do an overall high level. Let's say you're it's a good small business. Let's say you're a tax firm. First thing came to mind. If you're a tax firm, you might want to do, first of all, just understanding how do people understand their taxes? How do they figure out what to do? Because that'll understand the mindset they're coming into you. Let's say that's an example. But first, once you've said who's going to be the leader, now say, what is it we want to learn? Is it broad or is it really narrow, such as how do you feel after we provide you with your taxes? Let's understand that.
Right.
Then once you've done that, now go get the customers. And that's actually some of the hardest work, is getting your customers to agree to spend time with you. Here's a tip. If they don't want to spend time with you, you probably have a bigger problem than you expected. If you have a good, rich, close customer experience and great customer relationships, then they're likely to spend time with you. And in fact, in business to business, which is what a lot of small businesses are, not all of them, we don't even pay incentives. The strength of relationship is enough to get the interviews. In business to consumer or B2C, then we often do pay incentives. So that's third, then find your customers. And then lastly, this is the hardest part. Be quiet and listen. Biggest thing we find is that our clients want to explain. They want to solve problems. When you're talking to your customer that first interview, your job is just to ask questions. Don't state, no statements, no solution. Now, as soon as the interview is over, hey, go ahead and fix problems. In fact, you should. But we find that our clients want to explain things to their customers. And instead, it's time for you just to sit back and listen. So those are really the 4 tips I would give to small business.
That's amazing. Like it is very, if you go and think about it, it looks like it's just simple, and why are people not doing it? But it just sounds simple, but when you go about implementing these, it is difficult to maintain that process. Yeah.
We were working with a software company, and we did this a little differently. Normally what we do is we go to a customer site and we'll interview them there, or now Zoom or other virtual technologies.
Right.
We were at a big conference, and our client hired us to help them do mapping while at this conference. And so what we did then is we created groups of about 5 or 6 customers. We had a representative from our client there walking them through the mapping of the journey. Now, normally I don't have clients actually, the end customer, get out Post-it notes to do it. But in this case, because they're in a session that made the most sense. So we did that. And I gave the people at our client 3 rules they had to listen to. 1 is they could only speak in questions, never statements. Okay. 2 is they were not allowed to touch the Post-it notes. That had to be for the client to do. And 3rd, they were not allowed to start solutioning or coming up with solutions while in the conversation. And what we said is that, okay, in front of everybody, I said, if anybody from our client, ABC Software, starts breaking any of these rules, then that person has to come up on stage and sing, "I'm a little teapot," including all the motions. And so those 3 rules, especially with that in place, nobody broke the rule. They all spoke, and every time somebody would start breaking the rules, somebody would just say teapot, and okay, all right, sorry. And that was really effective at getting everybody to follow the directions, because we're not here to solve the problems. We're here to develop empathy and find out what the right problems are. As soon as the session's over, you go fix the problems. But right now, it's about empathy and about listening.
That's great. That's great. That is such a good exercise, or I can say, how do you restrain? This is the best way that you can do. That's great. What steps can these companies take to improve customer experience to reflect a positive change in the ROI?
Well, the first thing comes back to that, what are we trying to solve? Mm-hmm. And when we talk to a new client, a lot of times we've developed 5 questions we ask. Mm-hmm. The first one is, what's the business problem? Mm-hmm. And we'll often hear, the problem is we don't have a journey map. That's not a problem. As much as I love journey maps, that's not the problem. What is it that we need to solve from an organizational side? And then the second answer we'll often get is, well, our survey scores aren't good. Okay, well, that also is not a real business problem. Mm-hmm. I talked to a restaurant who they were seeing their survey scores going through the roof while the business was tanking. So just having low survey scores is not in and of itself a business problem, unless they reflect something going on. So if we find the customers who are giving you low scores also aren't buying with you anymore, okay, there's your business problem. Right. The survey is not an end to itself. It's not a score. The most effective programs aren't using the survey as a score. They're using it as a diagnostic. to help understand why the business problems are there. And so that's really there. So where's a measurable business problem we're having? And then maybe there, so let's say, for example, a measurable business problem is customers order once and then never come back again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a great example of business problem because you spend a lot of money acquiring customers. It varies by business, but let's say, for example, you spend $1,000 acquiring a new customer. That's not abnormal. If that's the case, well, then if they only order once and their average margin is maybe $100, well, you've just sunk $900 and you're probably never getting that back. So there's an example of business problem. Well, now you can say, all right, let's take a look at what do we know that's different about the people who are ordering from us once. Now maybe you have a survey that you can say, let's tie in the survey results with business results and say, all right, there's our problem. Well, then now ROI starts becoming a lot easier to track. So we can say, I'm making up a number here, 35% of customers only order once. We're losing $900 in margin for each one of those customers. So our goal now is let's reduce that to 25%. Now that's not excessive. Depending on the number of customers you have, we're having ROI of $900 for 10% of your customers. Let's say you have 1,000 customers for easy math. That means we've made 100 customers buy a second time. Well, now you can see start driving the ROI. But that's what we find most organizations have a hard time doing is actually getting down to those numbers. But that is how you drive ROI, by really understanding the business problem. In this scenario, the business problem is customers only ordering from us once. The ROI is defined depending on, first of all, we have a $900 gap. And in this made up example, $100 per order in margin. Now, if we can get 10% of customers, 100 of them, to order just one more time, well, that's $10,000 in margin. So I find that's really how you target the ROI. Now the hard part about that is it involves math. And we find a lot of people in customer experience are afraid of math. It's like, no, they're not really afraid of math, but it's hard to get the data. And so it's a lot easier to rely back on, 10% of people are giving us low survey scores. Let's go fix that. Now, here's what I found. Part of our interviews involve CEOs. Every CEO will say that he or she wants customers to give higher scores. Of course they do. And I'm sure they believe it. But they spend most of the time listening not to the customer experience leader. CEOs spend most of the time listening to the CFO. And I have yet to find a CFO who gets really excited about survey scores. Most of them couldn't care less. And so you need to really tie what you're doing. If the CFO signs and said, this is a good thing for us to be doing, then you figured it out. That's how you do ROI, is you go after a problem your CFO cares about, and that's how you rally the group, and that's how you really drive ROI.
That's a really good example that you have shared, and it totally makes sense, yes.
Right. One of our questions in these 87 interviews is we'll ask the customer experience person, said, how do you measure the customer experience? How do you know if somebody asks you whether the experience is getting better or worse? How would you answer that? And overwhelmingly, it's a service score. We'll say, how would your CEO evaluate the state of the customer experience? Some will say service scores. Others will say churn. Or they now throw in the oddball question, which is, how would your favorite finance person measure the current state of the customer experience? First of all, almost everybody, silence. And most of them will say, I've never thought about that before. In fact, one of them said, well, you're assuming I have a favorite finance person? I've never met anybody in finance. Okay, well, all right, there's a go. And we find a lot of times in customer experience, we're creating our own silos, which is what we're supposed to be getting rid of. And so it's tying into what finance cares about, which is, it can be hard, but that's how you know if you're able to drive ROI.
So how do you think business can leverage journey mapping to drive customer-focused change in the organization?
Well, so first of all, we talked about involving a lot of the organization. But there's a specific model I like to use. We find that change management is very, very critical in customer experience in journey mapping and all of this.
Right.
And one of the models I like is a pro-sci model called ADKAR. And that is, so Drishti, I want to convince you to move to Minnesota. Okay, you're going to leave Mumbai, you're going to come up to Minnesota. First of all, you have to be aware, the A, of your need, of why it's good to move to Minnesota. Next, you need to desire to move to Minnesota. You need to know how to do that. You have to be able to do that. And then I need to keep reinforcing why it's good for you to move to Minnesota. Well, those 5, probably the one I'm going to have the hardest problem with is your desire to move to Minnesota. It's probably not your awareness and your ability. It's not your knowledge. You know how to get a truck or probably a plane, a boat, whatever. But it's your desire to move to Minnesota that's going to keep you from moving here or get you to move here. It's the exact same with journey mapping and customer experience as a whole. If we find that the real problem is handoffs from one department to the next, and I want the 2 departments to coordinate better to get rid of that handoff, I need to build the desire inside of the teams to solve the problem. Bad journey mapping and bad customer experience focuses on the first A and the K. Hey, you 2 departments, you're broken, and I know how to fix it. That doesn't do it. This is why you should care. And that often comes from the literal voice of the customer. Hearing firsthand, so we record all of our interviews and we show videos of the customers talking about how frustrating it is that they thought they were in good hands with group 1 and they found out nothing moved forward because it never made it to group 2. And it was up to them to call group 2 and say, hey, what's happening? You need to really raise that issue and make the team's desire to get things better. And so we spend a lot of time building that desire. You also need the executives to reinforce, because what can happen is it gets better for a couple of months, and then people get busy. And then as handoffs start falling again, you need executives to keep reinforcing it, or better yet, technology to automate that so that it doesn't happen again. But you need to really think about that reinforcement as well.
That's true. That's true. It is more like you just mentioned, that something that is a part of the culture which is required to enhance this customer experience journey that they want to go into. So, yeah.
We find a lot of times in bad customer experience movements is they take a broken process and then automate it. And what that just results in is an automated broken process. So first you need to fix the process first, then it's time for automation. But if your automation is working well, it probably means you didn't take the time to fix the core problem. You just took what's going wrong and made it faster.
That totally makes sense. Like it was failing before, now it's just failing faster. So are there any other thoughts that you would like to share with our audience?
When I look across customer experience programs, I find that change management is what's most often missing. We all have our favorite tools. We have survey programs we like. We have journey mapping software. In fact, we've just actually started working with journey mapping software because it doesn't typically go after the core problem, which is change management. And so our maps, you can kind of see the background here, highly visual. In fact, that one, you can't read the text. You can see it ends pretty well. Maybe we can get into that, I don't know. But we try to create them highly visual because that's important for change management. And so 2 resources I like. First of all, ProSci, I mentioned earlier, their change management model, ADKAR. Big fan of that. Secondly is John Cotter. He has an 8-step approach to change management. ADKAR is more about the outcomes, about creating that desire and all the steps needed. Cotter is more about engaging the organization in an 8-step process. It means starting with, let's create a sense of urgency. Let's get everybody excited about this. And second of all, creating a powerful change coalition, which is getting your executives involved. There's 8 steps. So those first 2 I find is often where customer experience falls down, is that we all like the idea of a bottoms-up, culture-based approach to the customer. It feels good. It sounds terrific. And that is part of the model. But if you don't engage executives around a business problem, it's not sustainable.
That words to maybe stand by and organizations to think about, definitely.
We spend a lot of time reading, thinking about change management. We're not change managers, but we use those skills. We're customer experience geeks, journey mapping geeks. But we find that if you don't take the time to engage the culture, then you're going to be coming back a year later with the same business problem.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Jim, for giving us your time. Your insights were really valuable, and the audience is going to enjoy this interview.
Well, Drishti, thank you. I enjoyed talking to you, enjoyed meeting you, and keep thinking about that Minnesota thing. We'd love to have you here.
Definitely, I'll think about it.
All right.
So we'll be back with a new episode with a brand new expert soon. So stay tuned, and we'll see you around for the next one.